So where we left off with this little guy is we've got this guy blocked in here, but things are looking a little chunky. So if we take a look at things like his arm here, and we go ahead and rotate these guys, you'll see that there's just kind of these gaps where it could be a little bit more refined. So what we're going to look at in this session is how we can refine a blockout using a hierarchy flooding. And we'll go ahead and start with the leg here. If you want to, you can kind of move a leg into position to kind of see the effect it has. You can also create some animation as long as you're comfortable deleting your animations. I don't know exactly why I have negative time down here, but I could key this at 0 and just key this at 20 so you guys can kind of see that motion and what's happening there. And remember, you can turn on your textures with this character to kind of see how that looks with textures to kind of get a little bit more context. Now, that's probably not the end of the world because a character might move like that, but it would be nice if we had something a little bit smoother and a little bit less deformity. So the trick with the flood hierarchy approach is that what we can generally do is we can come on the edge that is the border between one or multiple joints. We can convert that to a vertex mode here. And what we can do is come here into our weight painting. We can go ahead and lock all of our joints. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. I'm just going to click the top, shift select the bottom, and click the lock icon. What this does is it makes it so values can't be applied to these. And then I'm just going to come to the two joints, in this case, the root and the hip here. And I'm going to unlock these. And what I can do is I can switch from add down here to smooth. And I can just click flood. And what I can do is I can smooth between these two joints to get something that's a little bit more refined. Now, what's also nice about this is I don't need to just do this across this single edge. I mean, if that does the trick, then by all means, let's go with it. We'll have to kind of determine if that does or not, or if I want to get more in there. It depends on how much I want that to kind of stick under the body. You can see I'm getting a lot of stretch there. So what I might want to do here is instead of just having it down there, come in and select the vertices on the borders above and below. So I could select this edge, I could shift select this edge, and I can select and shift that edge, convert these two vertices, and then flood across these. So we'll just go ahead and do our smooth and just flood. And I'll go between these two, but if we go ahead and take a look at the one where it's bent, you'll see now it's not really having a whole lot of distortion, and that's pretty much what we're looking for, right? So at this stage, we can see that's giving me a nice clean weight painting, a nice clean definition between that area. And as this bends and twists, it should be a little bit less deformy now and give us some okay looking results. And like I mentioned, okay looking, we don't have a whole lot of advanced stuff on this rig, but you can see the result it's giving us. Now, I generally don't animate my rigs anymore when I do my weight painting. I used to, so if you guys would like to add animations, you guys can. I'm going to go ahead and just delete the animations I've created here, and we're going to repeat this process with other areas. What I tend to do is just kind of bend the area that's problematic. And like I mentioned, I'm comfortable with conversion, so what I could do is I can see the edges here. And this particular one, the central edge is probably going to be the biggest, but because this character is just kind of a stuffy, we could probably select all of these, go to vertices. And then once again, what we're going to do is we're going to lock the ones we're not using, and we're going to unlock the ones we do. So I'm going to come in here to this influence. We're going to unlock the hip joint. We're going to unlock the knee. And then we'll just proceed to do a smooth and flood between these two until they look good. And that's already looking pretty good for our little knee bend there for our character. And this character is pretty forgiving. I want you guys to be able to get through the rigging process quickly. So just kind of be mindful that we will probably be able to get away with this on most of these. You'll notice right here, this does look a little bit funky as this goes. So one of the things I might do is maybe give this area just a little bit. And notice I'm giving it this area. I'm not giving the whole ring. I'm just giving these back few vertices. Sometimes you need to just address, one small area so that you get better deformation and you don't necessarily need the whole ring. But you'll see now that will give me a nice knee bend. All right, so let's go back to 0 without. We can then come down here to the ankle. So I can kind of bend the ankle to see what's going on here. Whole lots of nasty stuff. I do know for a fact I'm going to want to grab this area here and probably the top area. I'm not so sure on the foot, so let's go ahead and start with these two. We'll just go to vertices here. And just like we did before, we'll go ahead and lock up what we don't need, so we don't need the hip anymore. we can come down here to the ankle, unlock that, and then just proceed to do our flooding. Now you'll notice that looks a little bit better, but it's still pretty weird. So similar to what I did before, what I might do is come in here with, this back edge here on the ankle and grab this and include that in the flooding. And it really kind of depends on the shape we want. Some pinching there might actually be ideal. And just kind of flood this between these two. So there we go. And we can go ahead and kind of check how that's working and kind of see. So I'm okay with it kind of pinching there. I think that looks natural, which is fine. But you'll see now that we get this into place and we get a nice little setup. All right. So let's come down here to the ball. As you get down to these areas, it's a lot easier. The ball kind of already works, but maybe not. So in this particular instance, what I'll do is I'll kind of select the edge here that this is dealing with. Probably just this edge by itself. Come into the vertex here and go ahead and lock down the knee because we don't want the knee to control that. Come down to the ball, unlock that, and then just flood. And this one I might have to do a bit between. And I might consider, maybe this front area here a little bit. So maybe even the front two, we'll see. Just kind of smoothing this in for when that ball moves. I don't want to have too much deformation, up here. This might be a little bit too high. And this character has some weird looking legs, so that's part of it. But that'll make it now so when the ball lifts, that area moves in a little bit, and it makes room for that ball to kind of be shown off. Let's return that back to 0, 0. And as you might have guessed, we'll go ahead and get the toe going here and see if we need the toe to have some shared area with the ball, which we probably do. I don't know how often this character is going to be going on their toe, but in the case they do, let's go ahead and get rid of the ankle joints. Let's come down here and unlock this one. So I'll select influence and unlock, and then we can just smooth that out. All right, so there we go. Now what that's going to do is it's going to get our entire leg refined. So at this stage, our entire leg is going to be looking a little bit nicer. And if I come in here now and I grab these and we bend these together, we should see it's looking pretty smooth and our chunky block out is no more. Now, what we might do is refine this a little bit further. Some of these areas maybe look a little bit too chunky still, but I think overall I'm pretty happy with this. So what we'll do is we'll proceed to do this with the rest of the torso and arms. So let me go ahead and save as. This will be a new iteration as 03, just in case we make any mistakes. And we can go ahead and work our way up here to something like the torso. So immediately with the torso, I can see it's probably going to be, maybe between these two joints here. Just like I did before, I can lock what I'm not using. So just navigate those. You should only ever have 2 unlocked at a time until you get to more complex areas. We're going to unlock the roots, unlock the spine here, and we'll just go ahead and flood to add that together. And at this stage, what I can experiment with is just moving this around, side to side, forward, backwards, see if that feels okay. And for me, it does. So we're going to call that good. We can then move up here to the chest. We can kind of see what the chest is doing. We can see the chest is coming underneath here. So what I'll do is I'll probably select this one here under the chest directly. This next one's going to be a little bit challenging. We want to decide if we want that to be influenced or not. But let's go ahead and just start with this one to see if it's enough. We'll go ahead and lock the root, unlock the chest, and just flood. And this one's going to be a hard bargain. So we're going to have to do some adjusting here. There we go. That one's a little bit more aggressive. And what I might need to do is blend onto the one on top of here, right? So let's go ahead and take both of these. So this one and this one. And go ahead and blend that to that. So there we go. That's feeling a little bit more natural. And we can see how that's, working forward and backwards. So side to side, that looks okay. I think that's pretty much the motion I want to be getting. This character is kind of a bean sack, so you guys can customize it. And then we have forward backwards. You get a little bit of a gut, but I think that's just kind of natural in terms of what we're going to be seeing with this. What we can also remember is the spine almost always works as a unit. So it's very rare we just have the thorax moving alone. Usually you want to grab these two together to kind of determine how something's going to look for bending over or bending backwards. So, bending forward is a little bit weird here. I might want to change how much it influences this pouch area. And, this is not necessarily for this guy. It's actually for this guy here. So what I might want to do is blend this here, not with the chest. So I want to turn the chest off, but with the root. So that way this doesn't turn into quite as much of a gut here when the character bends forward. So we can go ahead and see how that works. And sometimes you actually have to come in here with solid numbers to get this to work. So for example, if I select this as an influence, I might have to add and set this to something like 0.03 and then just hit flood on this instead of smooth. So that way we can kind of add instead of, rely on the smoothing alone. But something like that might give us a little bit better look. I'm not going to worry too much about that there. It looks a little bit silly, but it should work for our character since he's just kind of a beanbag here. All right, so that will go ahead and get the spine and the chest done. So we have to kind of think about how we want to move up from here. Let's go ahead and move up to the neck. The neck will be kind of straightforward here. It's going to be between the neck and the chest to begin with. And pretty clearly, it is going to be primarily this control, but I think I'm going to do the two base controls here. So let's go ahead and set that. Let's take our chest here, and let's make sure that's unlocked. Let's make sure our root is locked. So check if you have any rogue ones unlocked, because if you do, it's going to cause problems. We can select our neck here, and then we can just smooth. And I'll set the value to 1, and we can click flood. And what that will do is I'll go ahead and flood that up so that this is influencing this area entirely. And what I might actually want to do is around that base of the neck, I might actually want to remove the influence from that. So in terms of the base of the neck here, I think maybe I don't really want the neck to control this at all. What you can do is you can actually set the value to replace and set the value to 0 down here, and you can actually flood and you can replace with 0. And I'll actually let you remove it entirely. So what we're doing now is we're making it so the neck doesn't control that at all. And that might actually be a better result. Maybe I'll give it a little bit of control here, but I actually think that's probably what I want there based on what I'm seeing. So let's go ahead and just smooth this out now a little bit. And I think that's a better result. So let's just go ahead and check the neck sideways. All right, that's looking pretty good. Forward, backwards. I'll go ahead and go with that. I'm not fully satisfied, but I don't hate it. So that'll give us kind of the neck. Yeah, it looks okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and do the head now. The head will just need this base one for the most part. And it might not even need anything, really. I don't know how much it needs to blend there. It'll be nice, though, if it blends a little bit. So we'll go ahead and take our vertex here, and I'm going to have to grab the next one down. But let's go ahead and get rid of our spine. Or in this case, our chest. Just have the neck and the head, and then flood that. All right, that eases that out nicely. So we have a nice look up, down, look left, look right. Cool, nothing wrong with that. All right, so now we have to get into the most annoying factor, which is going to be the arm. The arm is always the most work because it has the clavicle, which attaches to the body, and it has the arm itself. The clavicle here, like I mentioned on this character, the geometry is basic enough to where we don't really need to worry too much. Basically, the clavicle, we're just going to take this area that it controls, because we only give it one area to control, and we can have that blend a little bit with the chest if we feel it's needed. So in this case, I don't know. Make sure that you have everything locked, though, so you can see the neck and the head aren't. And I'll select the clavicle here, and then I'll go ahead and select the chest, since that's the next influence. And we can go ahead and do some smoothing here, just to kind of see if it gives us a nicer look between the clavicle and here, and I think it does for the most part. I don't think we really need to do much more than that. I think that's pretty much it in terms of this area. Though the clavicle might interfere with things like the shoulder. You know, we might want the shoulder to control this a little bit. There's all sorts of random little things that can kind of be a factor here with the clavicle. So just kind of be mindful of that. Like I mentioned, you know, if we're looking specifically at the clavicle here, I don't really have an issue with this. The big one for clavicle is kind of up. And you'll see in this particular case, I do want to bring in the shoulder a little bit. Now, if possible, what you do want to do with this is you want to try and isolate it from the chest. It'll make your life a little bit easier. So I'm going to take this first joint here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the chest control. We're going to turn on the shoulder now. And we're going to go ahead and flood this between the clavicle and the shoulder. See what we can get out of it here. What's kind of interesting is we're not really getting a result. That's surprising to me. But it's not too surprising. What we might want to do is have this vertice selected here as well. And maybe, you know, just kind of across a handful of these. And try smoothing and see what happens. Now, I'm actually kind of surprised we're not seeing a result. What that sometimes means is something else is influencing this area, which would be the chest. So I might want to come onto the chest and turn this on. And what we're going to need to do is basically blend between all three of these, which is the annoying part of the clavicle and the fact that, you know, it does affect up into the shoulder here and up into this area. So the clavicle quite often, you know, ends up just having a minor control over a given area. But you can kind of see the effect it has now, you know, controlling that chest volume and this area here. Now, as a consequence to how we approach this, in theory, our shoulders should also be working. So this should also be giving us the result that we're going to get here. That actually is shaping pretty nicely, you know, in tandem with the body. So I don't think I have any issues there. We'll want to just check the rolls and just try and get that to look as clean as possible. But the clavicle is one of those areas that's a bit of a nightmare because you're dealing with the clavicle, you're dealing with the chest, you're dealing with the shoulder, all in this tight space to kind of determine how this is going to look. Now, this looks pretty good as a natural pose, so I'm pretty happy with that. There is a little bit of twisting going on here that, you know, maybe I want to kind of alleviate or experiment with. But I think for the most part, that looks pretty nice. And I can't really complain. So let's go back into our bind pose here. Let's go ahead and save, and let's go ahead and work our way down to the elbow now. The elbow is going to be another easy one. It's just a hinge joint. So usually what that means is you grab the main joint here and you go ahead and flood that. In this case, I'll grab the 3 border joints here since it's kind of set up to be that way. And just like we did before, lock everything down that you're not doing. If you ever lose track of it, what I'll often do is just highlight everything and unlock it and then lock it. That will go ahead and reset everything to be locked. And then we can come in here and systematically unlock what we need. And just go ahead and flood that smooth. So just a little bit of flooding on this one, and it's going to be good to go. The elbow, you know, usually is pretty straightforward. We can send that bending nicely, and the elbow really only bends. It doesn't really need to twist, but it might twist a little bit. Generally speaking, though, we don't rotate our arm from that point. So that should be good. We can work our way down to the wrist, and the wrist is kind of the same deal. The wrist is a little bit trickier because it does have kind of a revolving rotation. But with this method and this geometry that I have set up here, generally speaking, we can just kind of grab this first one and maybe the second one here and just flood those between the elbow and the wrist here. So let's go ahead and flood that. And that should give us a clean enough deformation here to where we have something usable. And then we can work our way down to the fingers. Now, the fingers are generally really straightforward. Like I mentioned, they're usually pretty much done. What I usually do is blend them on the base here, and then with the next finger in line. The base here is going to blend back to the wrist. So, for example, this thumb here is going to be the thumb base here, which I'll unlock. It's going to be the wrist, and we need to lock the elbow. And we can just go ahead and flood that between these. And that will just give us a little bit of a smoother transition. And at this stage, if you want to, what you could do is you could do this for each of the base of the fingers. And remember, we can always use the return to bind pose to get us back to the bind pose here. But, you know, I could take this area around this finger here. Go ahead and lock the thumb. So let me select this and lock it. And apparently I didn't name these. That's kind of a shame. You'll see that this is named wrist joint. It's not too late to name these, so I could go in and I could name these. But yeah, make sure you name those. I got ahead of myself, it looks like. So we'll go ahead and flood that. And I'll go ahead and flood and give us a nice little knuckle definition. And then we can do the same over here. So basically, you know, doing this on the wrist now simply because all of the knuckles are going to go to the wrist. All right, so let's go ahead and hide that one. Unlock that one. Go ahead and flood. That should be good. Then we can come into these individual ones and we can get these up and running. The thumb will bend this way. And with the thumb, we can probably take just this one here. And sometimes it's nice to turn off smoothing, but ultimately if you have a sub-D mesh, you want to see what it looks like smooth, so just be mindful of that. We'll go ahead and select this as an influence. We'll flood. All right, that gives a nice bend. It's kind of surprising how nice that bend is, but okay. I'm not going to complain. We can do the same thing on the finger here. If you really want to, you can kind of bend each of these in, and you can identify the areas that should go with which. In this particular instance, like I mentioned, usually I don't do all three. I'll usually just do the center one because the fingers are meant to kind of pinch on top of each other like that. And the center one here is where the blending is not occurring. So it kind of depends on how you want to approach it. So let's go ahead and come to this knuckle here. Come to this bend. We'll flood. Yeah, let's go ahead and get all three of these. See if that gives a better result. Yep, that's going to look a lot nicer. All right. Then let's go ahead and move our way down to this one. Let's make sure this one's turned off. Actually, we need to make sure this one's turned off. And then this one's turned on. And flood to that. And there we go. That gives us a nice shape. So that finishes that finger. And then we can go ahead and repeat the process for the big old mitt here. So we'll go with these three. And the nice thing is generally if it worked for one, it's going to work for the other. Now this is a lot different because it's a mitt. It's not a tiny little finger. So it might interact a little bit differently. And we'll just see. Select this one next, and then proceed to do our flooding. All right, so right about there. And you want to make sure you don't overdo it. It's very easy to overdo it. Then we'll come into this one and do the same thing. Looks like I only have about 2 edges for this one, which is interesting. Maybe that was a topology issue on my part, but I don't think it'll matter too much for the resolution of this character. So that's fine. We'll come in here, unlock this, come in here and unlock this, and then flood. And what I'll do is I'll go and blend between this one as well. Oops. Actually, I don't want to blend between that one. That's going to give me too much of a knuckle. All right, cool. So that should work for the hand there. And we'll want to double check that, our flay can also work here, kind of moving in and out. That made those really far apart. I might actually have to add a translate to that later, which is fine. We can do that. But yeah, let's go back to our bind pose here. So skin, go to bind pose. And then once you think you're satisfied, you can go ahead and unlock everything and then mirror across. I'm pretty sure the mirror works without unlocking, but I like to unlock it and then mirror. So we'll go to skin, mirror skin weights, and we'll save. And now our character should have pretty nice looking skin weights overall. So we could just go ahead and do something like select the whole arm here with the hierarchy and, experiment with moving it forward or backwards. And now instead of looking super chunky, we start to get something that looks pretty natural. So I'm going to leave it here. You guys can take more time with your weight painting if you would like, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can go from kind of refinement to weight painting and to a final product relatively quickly with the flooding the hierarchy approach. Before I move forward, what I would suggest doing is just kind of doing some quick cleanup. If you spotted things like this, for example, this could be my L thumb 01 joint, and just come in here and kind of fix these up to make sure these are good to go. Kind of an important factor to make sure our naming is correct. So do any kind of cleanup you need to do. Just remember, if you do it to one side, you do have to do it to the other. So for example, I need to copy this name and paste it over here and switch the L to R. So that way I can be consistent. But that should give us everything we need. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here to clean up these joints, double check my weight painting's good. And once we get this all settled, what we're going to do is we're going to transition to building out the control rig. So go ahead and get your skin weights refined, get caught up to where I'm at, and then in the next session, we'll go ahead and start building out the controls for this and actually bringing our character to life.